morning, YouTube. Tire Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully you guys are doing well. Last night we did a live. Not too much really happened. It was mostly locally severe storms around the Texas Panhandle. We are likely to see another version of that today. As of right now, I'm not too concerned at the moment with the severe threat as far as tornadoes are concerned. There is a couple of models that have this shortwave being really tricky up towards the northern end of this. This is where I think the greatest tornado threat is going to exist, and this correlates with what the SPC is showing. Over here further to the south, I think a lot of instability exists, and this is where the area for hail and damaging winds is going to be greater. Excuse me. But on the southern flank here, you still have a marginal risk for a tornado, especially over towards Dallas, Waco, and Abilene, Austin as well, or east of Abilene. Of course, Oklahoma City. This has been the greatest area of interest to me so far. I do not see any real potential of this being upgraded to a slight tor risk, but we'll see what happens throughout the day. These shortwaves can be very tricky to deal with as far as forecasting is concerned, because they can really ramp up at the last minute. There's plenty of great examples of that, and I could go into that all day. But that being said here, I'm looking at several different models here, one of which is actually experimental. The funny thing is there's not a lot of model agreement here between some of the global and the short range models. The short range models are a little bit more aggressive with this. So if there is going to be a severe threat, we'll probably most likely see it based off of one of these models here today. So the NAM 3 kilometer has been pretty consistent with this in the traditional NAM, but recently, and I'm not saying that the marginal tornado threat isn't impressive, I've been seeing a little bit of a downtrend even with this model. So a lot of questions still on my end as far as confidence is concerned with this setup. Nonetheless, though, I have seen an uptrend in D cape here. D cape is downward cape, and that is usually indicative of damaging winds. Not so much a tornado threat, but there is one there. It's a decent audiograph. It's not the most crazy thing I've ever seen before, but nonetheless, that helicity there at 403 meters squared per second squared, not something to just laugh off here. Other indicators here aren't as impressive, but nonetheless, they're just sufficient enough to maybe get a weak tornado as of right now. Keep in mind, like I said before, that these shortwaves have a tendency of being very tricky, and that's what I think today's setup will be. A lot of that's going to be deterministic on whether or not we end up going live on this channel today. I plan to, but other factors may also come into play as well. So this is getting late into the evening here. Looking at the sounding, there is still a marginal tornado threat with this. Still decent storm relative felicity, but what happens here actually is the capping inversion or convective inhibition really starts to strengthen here, so this storm probably is going to end up being choked off. So the window for supercells and tornadoes is relatively limited, and over here to the south here, there's not really much forcing to be had. It's like I said, a very small corridor exists for tornado potential. Some of this is going to actually be most optimal early in the day, and even then I'm more or less just searching around between these models here trying to get a good idea of what we could still see. But overall, really along the southern flank here is where I'm kind of side-eyeing things, watching them a little bit closer. But even so, soundings, audiographs are a little bit messy. And then there's also a cap that's trying to come into play here as well. It's one of the better SKU-T charts, but the audiograph looks a little crazy. But again, look at that D cape over there, 921. When you get to 1,000, you can definitely acknowledge the fact that there's some pretty good damaging wind potential with this. It's about 2 in the afternoon for these guys. So we may have to watch this little line segment as it goes into parts of Oklahoma and Arkansas, as well as meandering through Texas here. The secondary area here, this is when the cap really starts to strengthen at this point. We're getting up to 103 on the joules per kilogram for convective inhibition. And look what's happened now. We've gone from marginal severe, marginal tornado to nothing. Like I said, these short waves can be very tricky to read here. And really the same can be said for all of these model runs here. It's pretty similar across the board. These small little pockets might be where you end up seeing severe weather. And again, like I said, it's few and far in between, not something you have a lot of confidence in. And then even on top of that, the shortwave itself isn't even that strong. Again, same situation with the HRRR. Cap's starting to strengthen, but we do have a marginal chance that we end up getting a storm that's capable of producing a tornado. Not even to say that it would. The significant tornado parameter is low. Supercell analogs is one of the best that I've seen so far. Nothing incredible, but nonetheless, something to keep an eye on. Decape with this, not so impressive. So moving forward, it's a pretty similar deal. Once this larger mass of the shortwave comes in, a lot of severe weather potential will be dissipating. And then here's the experimental model I've been looking at. This one has been the most aggressive out of the last couple times I've looked at it. Again, you have to take this with a grain of salt because, again, it's experimental. It's a prototype. And it's really not for decision making. Today we're breaking that rule, though, maliciously. So that being said, let's go ahead and take a look. It's kind of the only reason I'm really breaking the rules because I do see a little bit of agreement between this and the other short range models. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't even be looking at this, to be honest. Because again, experimental model, usually that means run. But look at how much more aggressive this one is. Or it's a little bit more aggressive. It has much more confidence in a tornado threat here, although some of the other potential is low, such as decape. There is a weaker cap with this. There's also a decent bit of instability as well. So a lot of interesting ins and outs with this setup here. I just find it interesting that an experimental model so far is picking up on things that I expect the global models to be doing. But global models don't even pick this setup up. It hasn't for like the last 4 days, so kind of a weird situation. Now towards this point here, this is where I kind of call it bullish because by 04Z we're starting to lose instability. The kinematics are there somewhat. In fact, this is one of the better photographs I've seen. But again, like I said, experimental. Not really willing to trust it. Who knows, though? I've been wrong, and I'm more than willing to be surprised. Hopefully, though, this doesn't happen. But that being said, that's what we're looking at with the short range. When we look into the other parameters such as cape and bulk shear, not a whole lot to be written on about the kinematics, but the instability, however, look at that. Getting up to about 3,000 joules per kilogram, pretty explosive environment. Probably going to see a few areas a little bit later on getting close to 4, especially towards that Oklahoma-Texas line there. It's probably like this tiny pocket. There it is, 4,000. Going to go ahead and click on that, and oh, there we go. Increased torque threat there, more confidence in it, not much. It's a pretty similar deal. But all in all, kinematically speaking, it's not the most impressive threat. And the thing is, once we get into Arkansas, the NIM really kind of cuts off the instability here. It's very limited at that point with the mixed layer. Towards the surface, it's a little bit more impressive. Again, like I said before, the overall kinematics are not that impressive, especially towards the mid levels. Low levels could be a little bit sneaky too today, but as of right now, I'm not really super concerned with it. I do kind of want to look still, especially since I just woke up by the time I started this. Yeah, there's really not a lot to go around. There is this little pocket that tries to develop, but I think the timing of it is going to be too little too late. Probably RRFS has something a little bit more aggressive, but we're not going to look too far into that. And then, of course, there's the HRRR, which has been pretty reliable in years past. But yeah, it's a pretty similar deal. There's a lot of agreement as far as the way the low-level jet sets up, and it's just not really favorable for a significant tornado threat as of right now. That being said, we'll go ahead and look at the lapse rates here, because me and a lot of the guys on Discord, we're kind of thinking the hail threat's going to be the big thing today. When we see significant hail, that's still questionable because the lapse rates themselves aren't that impressive. Not like the last few setups that we've seen, but a couple of pockets over here towards southern Texas, like I mentioned earlier, could see some pretty impressive hail, maybe up to 2 inches or greater. This setup right here around this time isn't even that impressive here with hail. Lapse rates are good. The instability is good, but we're just not really picking up on any matches right now. Well, we are, but they're very loose, so to speak. There is a decent bit of decape here, but the problem is there is a pretty solid cap that starts to take place later into the evening. So the problem is our lapse rates aren't that great. They seem to almost be kind of lagging behind the forcing point with that shortwave. So as a result, we're really kind of on the fence here. Like I said, things are likely to change to the morning and afternoon hours. Which way does it go is the key question. But that being said, hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's time for me to get out of here and go to work. I will hopefully see you guys maybe in the live tonight, or if not, I'll be making a weekend forecast, and then we'll be talking about hurricane season tomorrow. So make sure you hit that like button, slam that subscribe button, smash that bell on, obliterate the share button as well. Also, feel free to ask any questions that you may have in the comments. I always try to respond to as many of them as I can. That being said, though, this has been Tyler, Metalhead Weatherman. You guys have a good day, and I hope to see you soon. Take care.